I didn't realize how big Honduras was for starters in Guatemala. I thought Costa Rica was bigger, right? Because I'd never been here. My parents had been here before I came. It's part of the reason I applied here, because I knew about it from my folks. But yeah, it's it's ignorance. Ignorance just means you don't know, right? It's not good to be ignorant, but it's not necessarily your fault because you might lack that exposure, right? I mean, you guys said you're not surprised by this, but did you know this?
No.
Well, then you're ignorant of it. It's not a bad thing.
I would think the agriculture would be a little bit higher.
I would too. I mean, even though I wouldn't think that it'd be the majority, because many economies like the United States are now, transitioning into, not even transitioning, where the vast majority of our economic activity is service sector. So it doesn't surprise me.
I would think like 15% maybe.
50?
Yeah, 15.
But a lot of your land is also unused,
Yeah.
So these dynamics can change, and you have a lot of protective laws here that you don't find in similar countries as far as protecting the environment, which is good, but an industrialist wouldn't like them because...
Yeah, but those laws are the ones that attract tourism because we protect our...
You're protecting tourism industry, but somebody who wants to maybe mine for, I don't know, whatever you have up in these mountains, you have tons of mountains, I'm sure there's plenty of natural resources in there that could be extracted, right? And somebody can make a fortune doing that. But then you're going to contaminate the local ecology of the
We also have the electrical industry here is from dams, especially.
Yeah.
Oh, hydroelectric.
We have
There-
hydroelectric and winds.
We have a lot of rivers and tons of water. I mean, you have 2 coastlines for a tiny country, you have a lot of coastline.
There was a problem last year, I think, that they wanted to make another one of these. And the Indians, the native Costa Ricans that lived like in the zone, they didn't permit it.
So yes,
Of course, well, there's always going to be
Because of-
conflict.
Environment.
there is a place that's perfect to build it down in the Pacuara River, but there's been a huge dilemma for building it there because the ecologists, first there's them, but they're trying to stop it because of environment. There are the tourism industry because of the Pacuara River, a lot of people who rafting there.
Right.
And then there are the Indians that live there, and it's been a huge problem. I've seen
Well, there's going to be conflict of interest. You see this all over. I mean, you see it in United States history as well, where a dam's going to be built and people are opposing it because their town's going to get inundated with water, basically flooded in that process. Now, transitioning, not to cut you off, but we got to move forward. Think about how this economic activity of a region affects the culture of a region. Think about it in regards to Costa Rica. How has the economic activity, looking at this map again, we looked at before, affected the culture? Because Costa Rica, 4.5 million people, but it's not a monolithic culture. You understand? It's not like everybody's the same. There's variation. How has the economic activity affected the culture? Because this is a big idea when we look at the history of the United States. How the different various economic activity happening in the north is going to influence their culture versus the south, how their culture is going to be influenced because the economic activity is so different. It draws different types of people, different types of backgrounds.
Well, yeah, it kind of depends on like the people and how they are. Because let's say the coffee fields, like more people like that are more ignorant will start to work there because it pays less and it's like they're more used to that type of work. While as people that live in the city, they're more used to like industrial type. So it kind of depends on what person you are, and that's why I like distance groups.
Okay, so in the city in Costa Rica, San Jose, Central Valley area, people have maybe more exposure, they're more educated, there's more cultural diffusion, there's more diversity,
Whereas at
maybe
the
they're
beach
more
or something,
open-minded.
Yeah.
Suppose versus the campesinos
Yeah.
who are, like you said, they're working in whatever plantation it is, and they don't have that same type of exposure, so maybe they're more traditional.
Like fishermen
Close-minded.
and stuff like that. They're like
Fishermen.
they're not too educated.
Limon. Let's talk about Limon, because this is really interesting, because this is, I mean, if you want to talk about race or ethnicity, this is a real marked difference between, one province in Costa Rica and the rest of the country. What about it?
But the blacks were, most of the people that were black and they were imported from Jamaica.
Uh-huh.
They worked with banana fields, and so their culture is really different from
And also their language.
Costa Rica.
They speak a different language. They speak Spanish
Oh, yeah,
too,
they speak
but they
Spanish,
speak
but-
patois, and a lot of them speak
Yeah.
English.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
Whenever I go to Limon, I was always, well, I've been there now maybe 4 or 5 times, but you'd hear them talking to each other, and sometimes they'd talk to each other in English before they would talk to each other in Spanish, which
Yeah.
surprised me, you know. And these I'm talking about young men, you know, or young people, like 20s, 30s, speaking, they're born here. We know this happened in the beginning of the 20th century, more or less. They weren't brought here as slaves, right? They were invited here to work in the plantations, but to one specific area. And if you go there now, you know, calypso music, yeah, I mean, this is where the Costa Rican calypso movement began, right? They brought their distinct kind of, we call it Afro-Caribbean culture to Costa Rica, because
Yeah.
before they came, there were very few people of African descent.
There was a policy in here that until 1948 they couldn't get out of Limon, and it's interesting because after that policy was cancelled, they still live in there. Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult to see.
Most, but there's
Most of
some,
them.
well, talk about this school. How many black Costa Ricans go to Lincoln? How many kids are in this school?
Like 600.
600, there's
1,500.
1,000.
For high school. for
Okay,
like
yeah.
this building.
The whole school, there's 1,300 kids. Not one of them is of, we could call it Afro-Caribbean descent. Or not even descent, not one of them is an Afro-Caribbean. Even though a whole province is full of Afro-Caribbeans here.
Because if you take the national average, you're not gonna find that we have a huge population that's.
What do you think the percent is? 10%?
It's like that.
No.
Maybe 50.
But the point being, it's a very distinct kind of line in the sand, right? And that line in the sand is going to develop in the United States, between the North and the South as well. So, based on your readings, I'm going to have you do this little kind of entrance ticket quiz. So just take out, all you need is a half sheet of paper. It's going to require you to write 2 paragraphs, one on each side, so you can split a sheet of paper with one another. I'd like you to take everything off your desk. And once you guys have this ready, I'll project the questions on the board. I'm going to give you about 8 minutes, so that'd be 4 minutes for each question. Let me see if I can make this thing zoom better. Let me see here. Yeah, I got to figure out a way to get a better camera going. Because I can never get the class and the board at the same time. It is a dilemma, Amanda. Everybody got a half sheet? Alright. So, 4 minutes for each. Just do one on each side. Basically the same question twice, okay? But directed at different regions. So, question. Explain one way the North developed uniquely from the South, and one innovation that encouraged that development. 2. Explain one way the South developed uniquely from the North, and one innovation that drove that development, or encouraged that development. You understand? Innovation could be a specific, let's say, invention, technology, for example, or an entire movement, right? Or a paradigm shift in production, a change in how things are produced, right? Do you understand? This should not be very difficult. It should cause you to think about what you're writing. And I'm hoping that everybody gets full credit on this, so we can get some exemptions.
Brothers, how the way they developed from the South? Or?
Well, yeah, I want you to basically tell me how they develop unique from each other. So one is asking you to explain about the North, how it developed uniquely, and then the other side is asking you the South, how did it develop uniquely, and what drove this kind of development? Because you're going to have the same country, but develop very, very differently. Okay? And we're going to talk about how. I just can't tell you right now, because we're doing a little entrance quiz on it. So 7 minutes. Try to change this angle. Five more minutes. A paragraph for each one. So, couple sentences. I'm not counting sentences as usual. I'm looking for content, conceptual understanding, evidence. If it's one long sentence, but it, you demonstrate to me 100% that you understand the question and you can answer it using evidence from your readings, you get full credit.
Innovation can be like laboring techniques.
Innovation could be labor techniques, it could be a specific invention, it could be an entire movement. And innovation is just a kind of a change or an improvement, right? In the way that something's done. Three more minutes. So when you're done, raise your hand. I'll come over and pick it up. You done? Thank you. See? So you got about 1 minute to wrap this up, guys. Go ahead. No, it's fine. As long as your name's on it. I'll grade these quick. Just hold on. Remind me at the end of the class so I can take you off the game card. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.